Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today's story is an intriguing tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more captivating narratives. Now, let's get into the story. I grew up in a small town that was about 15 minutes outside of Munich. For personal reasons, I'm not going to name the town, but in short, let's just say that it's full of elderly people who love to give blood donations. I was around 13 or 14 years old. I'm female and had recently dropped out of regular school due to severe bullying. I began doing online school, which was much easier because there were fewer people picking fights with me. My older sister, Anna, would leave early in the morning to go to school, while my dad would leave at the same time for work. My mom would stay home with me for a few hours in the morning before going out to work as well. That would leave me home alone all day until Anna, Dad, and Mom came back. I didn't really mind being on my own that much. My parents, however, weren't too happy with me being on my own. At the time, I didn't pay much attention to their worries or warnings about the growing dangers in our town and in Germany in general. When I look back on this now, I realize how weird and slightly creepy this was. I'm just going to tell you what was going on in my town so that you can understand some context. Since there were many elderly people, it was pretty easy to break in and rob them. I don't want to sound offensive, but there were these old men from Romania. They would come into different towns, including mine, and recruit teenagers to rob houses. In return, they would give them money, drugs, and so on. Usually, the teenagers would run up and down different streets and ring people's doorbells. Actually, I should say fence bells. In Germany, everyone has a fence around their house, and we don't have guns like in America. Unless you're a hunter and work at a market or something, then there are a lot of restrictions. The teens would come up to people's houses, ring their doorbells, and wait a few minutes. They'd watch the house for a while, and then run off. They usually did this to see who would respond. It was a way of checking to see who was home, or if someone was even home at all. When this happened, it was best to call the police. The teens would usually try to outrun the cop cars. Sometimes there were fake entrepreneurs who would ring people's doorbells and try to sell them something. They really just wanted you to open the gate so they could get in and rob you. Recently, before this incident, an old lady was beaten and robbed because she opened her gate for 2 police officers. They said they wanted to ask her some questions about a case, but they weren't real police officers. Now that you know about that, my story will make much more sense. The teens running up to people's gates was a daily thing, so we were all used to it. I'm quite a curious person, so when the doorbell rang, I peeped my head out the curtains to see who it was. I have a really good memory, so I still remember what this guy looked like. He had an American-style high school sports team jacket. His hair was slightly spiky, with what looked like hair gel, and he wore dark blue skinny jeans with white sneakers. I didn't think he saw me, since I just stuck my head through the curtains for a few seconds. My parents told me to call the police when this happened, but I didn't feel threatened. Eventually, he left, and I went on with my work. Over the next couple of weeks, I'd see him come up and ring the doorbell. He would wait, scan the house, and then leave. This started to happen more and more frequently, and I still never called the police on him. I guess I figured that if something were to happen, I'd use my taekwondo on him and his buddies. But I highly doubted that that would happen. On some days, he would come early in the morning and watch my father and Anna leave the house. He just stood there watching them. I thought this was weird, but I still wasn't too alarmed. One day, however, he was standing outside our house. He was across the street, just watching us for hours on end until my mom came home. Another day, I saw him in his usual spot across the street, just staring at us again. He must have been there for 2 hours, until a black car with tinted windows pulled up. He got into the car and sat there for a few minutes before driving away slowly. I thought that was odd, but I never mentioned it to my parents. Well done, younger me. A few days later, I was doing my schoolwork when my mom told me she was going out to buy something. I just nodded at her and continued my work. The following part will be from what my mom told me. My mom had pulled the car into the garage and was about to leave the house when she made eye contact with the teen. He made some kind of a creepy grin at her. My mom felt something was off. She pulled back into the garage and closed the gate. She came upstairs and told me to come with her because she didn't like the way the guy was standing in front of our house. I didn't want to get up and go anywhere, but my mom forced me to come with her. When we pulled out of the garage and we were in the street, my mom closed the gate. I turned my head and made contact with the guy. He looked really angry about something. As we drove away, I turned my head back to look at him again and saw he was turned towards us. He watched me and my mom drive away. He just stood there looking really angry until we were out of sight. Once we were gone, my mom told me how creepy he looked, and she called the police to come to the house. This time, the police responded quickly and took our concerns seriously. They began patrolling our neighborhood more frequently. A few days later, the police apprehended a group of teenagers and adults involved in the robberies. The creepy guy was among those arrested. It turned out they had been targeting several homes in the area, and our report had helped the police catch them. Reflecting on this memory, I realize how fortunate we were that nothing happened to us, and that the situation was resolved safely. It was a lesson learned about the importance of taking precautions and trusting our instincts. Second story. This story is about a relationship I had around 7 years ago when I was 30. I had met a girl through my friends, Alex, Jordan, and Emma, and we hit it off. Her name was Lily, and we had a lot in common, so it wasn't long before we started dating. Our friends were all super happy about that. Who doesn't like playing matchmaker? Things were going really well at first, and it wasn't long before we were staying over at my place a few nights per week. I had a 1-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a really nice building in Chicago. It was a little out of my price range, but I managed to keep up with the rent by cutting other expenses. Having a nice place is, and was, really important to me. It would also be a little embarrassing to bring a girlfriend back to a hole-in-the-wall apartment like the one I had before this place. On the 4th or 5th time she stayed over, I woke up in the middle of the night with an anxious feeling. I felt like I was being watched, but I sat up and looked around, and there was nothing there. I slumped down against the headboard of my bed and looked down at Lily, who was fast asleep. I figured it must have been a bad dream that I couldn't remember. I would get those sometimes. I'd feel all the anxiety from a terrible dream, but have no memory of what actually happened. It's a weird feeling, but I didn't worry too much at the time. On another occasion, when Lily was over, I woke up again with the same feeling. But this time, as soon as I opened my eyes, I could see Lily's face right in front of me. Her wide eyes were staring at me with a startling intensity. I jumped from shock. Her normally pretty face was surprisingly creepy in the dark. The only source of light was a slight glow from the open window, but as soon as I realized it was her, I calmed down. "Whoa, you scared me," I whispered. She didn't speak. She just stayed still, leaning over me, staring. I didn't see her blink once. After an awkward 10 or 15 seconds, I placed my hands on her shoulders and gently laid her back down on her side of the bed. Then I went back to sleep. The next morning, I brought it up while we were eating breakfast. As we sat at my kitchen table, I told her that I woke up and she was staring at me, her eyes wide open. She insisted that it never happened. Not that she didn't remember, but that it didn't happen, and she was really quite defensive about it. I decided not to push the issue any further, although I knew that it did happen. At the time, I believed she was probably sleepwalking and was sensitive about it. I figured it was not worth it to convince her that I was right. However, I was still creeped out because I thought that sleepwalkers always had their eyes closed. I Googled it later, though, and found out that eyes are often open for sleepwalkers, so maybe it was that. Nothing happened for the next several weeks, and other than that incident, the relationship was really going great. We had a number of fantastic group dates with our mutual friends, and things were progressing very quickly. We even started to discuss our future together. That would come to a halt very soon, though. It was a night like any other at my apartment. We cooked dinner together like usual, then watched a movie on the couch and went to bed around midnight. I awoke again in the middle of the night with that same feeling of anxiety. When I opened my eyes, Lily was not facing me like before. I immediately looked to her side of the bed, where she was gone. I was confused for 2 or 3 seconds until I looked forward. Lily was standing in front of my bed, the open door to the hallway behind her. Her long black hair covered most of her face, but I could see her wide open eyes looking at me, a blank expression on her face. I blinked a few times while my eyes were adjusting, and when I did, I noticed something terrifying in her right hand. She was holding a large chef's knife from my kitchen. "Lily, what are you doing?" I asked. She stood there, swaying slightly. A creepy smile slowly appeared on her face. With that, I had seen enough. I quickly threw on some clothes and got out of there. I had to pass right by Lily with the knife in order to get out of the room, but she didn't make a move. She just stood there and let me leave. I slept in my car that night, and the next day, I broke up with her over the phone. Again, she insisted that nothing happened and even accused me of making it up to get out of the relationship. That was the furthest thing from the truth. To make matters worse, she convinced all our mutual friends that I was making it up, and they all took her side. I went my own way and made new friends. I didn't talk to any of them for years after that. However, I did find out through Facebook that Lily began dating our friend Alex after this incident. I hadn't heard anything about them in years until I ran into Emma at the grocery store. It had been a long time since the incident, so it was all water under the bridge to me. When I locked eyes with Emma, it seemed like she'd seen a ghost. I started walking over to her, smiling, but her face looked frightened and timid. I figured she thought I'd be mad, so I walked over to her and gave her a big hug to show her that there were no hard feelings. It didn't seem to work, though, because as soon as I let her go, I noticed that she was crying. I stood there confused for a few seconds, then led her outside to the parking lot where we could have a little more privacy. She eventually calmed down, and when she did, I found out why she was crying. She told me that shortly after Lily and Alex started dating, Alex began experiencing strange occurrences. He would wake up in the middle of the night to find Lily standing over him, staring. One night, he woke up to find her holding a knife, just like I had. Unlike me, Alex didn't get away. One night, Lily attacked him in his sleep, and he barely survived. Emma gushed for several minutes about how right I was, and about how wrong everyone else was for doubting me. How, if only they had listened to me, Lily might have gotten the help she needed before it was too late. Alex was in a psychiatric facility now, recovering from the trauma. This incident is something that will stay with me forever. Although I tried to say something at the time, not a day goes by that I don't feel guilty for not doing more. I let the issue go and moved on with my life, a luxury that Alex will never have. Third story. I worked as a flight attendant for several years, and when I decided to take an extended break from college, I encountered a particularly chilling let's not meet situation. Originally from California, I moved to Chicago when I was 21. During a week-long trip, I was thrilled to find out I'd have a couple of overnights in San Francisco, a city close to my heart. My sister lived nearby, and we planned to catch up and have dinner the night I arrived. The next day, we were meeting our parents, who lived about an hour away. Upon arriving at the downtown hotel, the crew and I checked in, and I headed to my room after a quick elevator ride. Within 5 minutes, there was a loud, insistent knock on my door. It was only around 1 or 2 p.m., and I hadn't yet informed my family of my arrival, so they wouldn't know my room number. I assumed it might be one of my crewmates, so I approached the door cautiously. But before reaching it, a deep male voice on the other side declared, "Maintenance, here for the plumbing issue you reported. Open the door now." I froze. I hadn't called about any plumbing issues, nor had I used the bathroom in my room yet. Despite being petite, I didn't take risks. I inched toward the door to look through the peephole. The man on the other side was at least 6 feet tall and solidly built. There was no way I was going to unlock the door. I told him he had the wrong room, but he persisted, pounding on the door and trying to turn the handle forcefully, insisting he needed to get in. Panicking, I grabbed the phone and called the front desk. They confirmed they hadn't sent anyone up for maintenance and hadn't received any calls about plumbing issues. Meanwhile, the man continued banging and shouting. Thankfully, security had been alerted to my floor. When the security officers arrived moments later, they confronted the man, asking him who he was and what he was doing. He grew hostile and aggressive toward them and the hotel staff. The front desk informed me that police had been called and were on their way. Trapped in my room, fear gripped me. Suddenly, the man stopped banging and turned to face the security officers and the police who had arrived. He began shouting angrily, demanding to be let into the room. The police Police swiftly subdued him and arrested him for trespassing and attempted entry. It turned out he had a history of violent behavior and had targeted several individuals in hotels across the city. After the incident, I couldn't shake off the unease for the rest of my stay in that hotel. It was a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary door,